Do you ever feel like giving up? Nothing dramatic like killing yourself or doing hard drugs, just like stop trying so hard, go to work when you have to and do the minimum while you're there, come back home and pass the time in front of some video game or easily digestible content, whatever it takes to just not exist until it's time to go to bed. Or, more likely, way past the time to go to bed. Then fall asleep to shitty Instagram reels. You know the feeling I'm talking about, right? When the idea of finding love or putting time into an art project just seems so obviously futile. And it just makes sense to let go and waste away. I mean, who gives a shit, right? Does any of this even matter? You're going to die, and all of these efforts are going to mean nothing once you're gone. And if we're honest here for a second, out of all of the people that you know who are actually trying, it doesn't seem like anybody's really happy, now does it? Yes? Does this have anything to do with the Slaughterhouse-9? Good question. The Slaughterhouse-9 are a pretty obvious reference to the book Slaughterhouse-5 by author Kurt Vonnegut. To me, Vonnegut was the first author that made me feel like I'm a grown-up being spoken to by a fellow adult. Slaughterhouse-5 isn't my favorite of his. I don't know if Walbo wanted to refer to this book specifically or to Vonnegut's work in general. Using a name like Galapagos wouldn't be as clear as a reference, and neither would be Breakfast of Champions. The Slaughterhouse-9, however, is a distinct reference while at the same time sounding like a natural name for a gang of killers. Vonnegut is an expert in communicating this sort of nihilistic despair, and he does it in every single one of his books. Let me give you some examples. Galapagos, which is my favorite, starts with the narrator telling you that he's going to mark with an asterisk every character that's going to die by the end of the day. He proceeds to describe a young married couple on the way to their honeymoon, the overjoyed wife in the early stages of pregnancy, and her loving husband who has an asterisk over his name, meaning that he's going to die that very same day. The narrator continues to describe a conversation between them as they talk about their bright future, their hopes for their daughter, and the beautiful life they're all going to share together. And every time you see that little asterisk, you're slapped in the face with that disillusion. Quoting my maternal grandmother, a woman who had found herself in a Siberian labor camp at a time when she expected to attend university, "Man makes plans while God laughs." I was told it rhymes in Polish quite a few times. Vonnegut's books never revel in cruelty, and they don't have any real villains. The people who do bad things are either maddened by bitterness or just misguided. Vonnegut expands the futility of the question that we asked about human cruelty, the "what is this for?" to a wider, all-encompassing "what's the point of any of this?" Vonnegut's nihilism is inescapable. Even when his characters mean well, they can barely do any good in a world where it's so hard to understand what's going on. Like in Worm, the clashing of different perspectives is a pervasive theme. What I like most about Vonnegut's work can be summarized in a short story that one of his own characters writes in Breakfast of Champions. It is one of the funniest and saddest things I've ever read, and it goes a little something like this. An alien lands on Earth, and this is an alien from a race that looks exactly like human beings, but unlike human beings, they communicate by dancing and farting. And so as the alien lands, the first thing he comes across is a house fire. The alien sees that there's a quick rise in temperature and that the chemical reaction can spread. And when he sees a person standing outside of the burning house, his first reaction is to communicate to them the danger that they are in. So he runs to this person who is standing outside of their own home and watching it burn and starts dancing and farting on them. Then that person beats the alien to death. The reason it's so sad and funny is because it's the most important human story. Two people acting reasonably within their own perspectives, hurting each other for no good reason. A sentence that comes up a lot in Vonnegut's work is "so it goes." And it's no wonder that when Jack, the leader of the Slaughterhouse-9, is described by another character, she uses this exact same phrase. Did I tell you that I love this book? Because I fucking love this book. But wait, how are Vonnegut's works actually connected to Worm? Vonnegut often explores the theme of existential helplessness, and many of the characters live in a state of constant giving up. But in Worm, we don't really get to see anybody just resign and stop fighting. What we see in Worm is another type of giving up, opposite from what I described in the very opening of this video, an active, spiteful giving up. When Walbo was interviewed by Doof Media, the dudes asked him about artists that inspire him. In his response, Walbo mentioned Donald Glover, the creator of Atlanta, one of my favorite shows ever, and so I'm going to use that as an excuse to talk about a scene from Atlanta. One that I was going to talk about anyway because it perfectly exemplifies that kind of spiteful giving up. Atlanta tells the story of a young black man named Ernest, meaning honest, though everyone calls him Ern, as in earning money. Names are important. Ern has been trying very hard to escape the negative aspects of black American culture. A smart and hard-working individual, he manages to get accepted to Princeton University only to get kicked out after an incident of an obviously racist nature. But Ern doesn't give up. As his cousin Alfred becomes a famous rapper, Ern takes the opportunity to become his manager and use his intelligence and education in order to successfully run the business side of things. There is a lot to analyze about this show and its characters, but I'd like to focus on Ern's foil, Tracy. Tracy is the polar opposite of Ern. While Ern tries to keep his nose clean, Tracy is released from prison and immediately goes back to running petty scams. Ern tries to be self-sufficient, Tracy crashes in Alfred's place and eats his food. Ern tries to keep a low profile, particularly around white people, while Tracy fucks shit up for no reason. In the 9th episode of Season 2, mild spoilers, Ern tries really hard to organize a successful concert, which I remind you means escaping poverty in the clutches of a culture he finds toxic. And every step of the way, Tracy's reckless behavior ruins that for him, eventually leading to a situation where Ern's computer with all of his unbacked up work is stolen, which finally causes Ern to snap, and his snapping comes with a line that I will never forget. "Stop the car so I can fight this n***." In that moment, Ern stops trying to be a hardworking black man, taking responsibility for his life, and he allows himself to be the other thing. Every single person in the car knows how the fight is going to go. There's something endearing in the way that even Tracy himself tries to convince Ern to back off. He wasn't trying to bully Ern, he was just being his reckless self. But Ern is too angry to back off. Even though he knows what he's doing is self-destructive, he gives in to that rage, and in the end, he gets beat up in a scene that is truly hard to watch. It's just so pathetic. If it wasn't clear, I warmly recommend this show. The 9 aren't like Ern. I mean, some of them are, some of them were, but most of them aren't. The people who the 9 target are like Ern. The 9 are like Tracy, or a version of Tracy that enjoys causing this transformation in people. And this is the heart of the 9's horror. They will come into your life without warning, and they will transform you into the very thing you're trying not to be. This isn't a new thing. The reason that werewolves, vampires, and zombies are staples of horror is not because they'll kill you, but because they transform you into something monstrous. Something you have the potential to be it feral, parasitic, or mindless, respectively. This is the kind of horror our boy perfected with the Slaughterhouse 9. I don't use the word perfect often, and when I do, I try to make sure it counts. Theoretically, it's possible to write something scarier than the 9, but when I try to think of a character that scared me more than Burnscar or the Siberian did, I find myself at a genuine loss. I've known that the horror of the 9 is about unconsenting transformations since I started making these videos, but I kept asking myself what type of transformation exactly are they trying to engender. I kept asking myself what is the most terrifying thing to be turned into, and the answer I came up with was a creature that is incapable of love, which is close but not quite it. Then my patron Lex commented on Taylor's interaction with the 9 and how they make her even more Taylor than she was before, making the 9 the perfect antagonists for Taylor. If Taylor's main quality is that she keeps trying, it's almost obvious what it is that the 9 are trying to get people to stop doing. The perfection of this horror is that unlike being turned into a werewolf, which is impossible and also sounds kind of fun, being made to give up is something that can happen to you in real life if you let it. The horror is despair itself. This is something that started with the merchants. We've already seen Skidmark facilitate free-for-all brawls, particularly in order to engender despair. But the people the merchants targeted were powerless in more than one way. Now, the 9 are aiming to prove that even the powerful, the proud, and strong-willed can be broken just the same. The 9 are one member short, you see, and as they go recruiting, they aim to prove that anyone could be turned into one of them. This recruitment is shown through 8 interludes, each one depicting an encounter between one member of the 9 and the respective recruit, each one detailing a different kind of giving up that is applicable to real life. Today we're going to go over these 8 interludes is what I wrote in the first draft of this intro. However, after analyzing the first 3 interludes, I realized I've written enough text for a full video. Can you believe that I used to think I'll sum up the whole point of the 9 in 1 hour? A part of me was tempted to cut my analysis short, to edit stuff out until I could squeeze all of these interludes together. But there's no point in analyzing these chapters if I'm not digging as deep as I possibly can. Because there is a truth in each and every one of them, a truth that was left there by the author as a gift to you. Yes, you specifically. Remember, we're not here to have fun. We're here to learn something about the nature of the reality we live in. Let us begin with one of the most terrifying characters to ever grace the genre of horror. The Siberian arrives in the middle of Rachel's interlude, which, to me, is one of her most brilliant moments. You see, up until that point, we saw Rachel as this grumpy, overly aggressive ball of trauma. She reminds me of a dog a friend of mine used to have. She had been taken from a shelter and had obviously been abused by her previous owner, and so she never let anyone pet her. She used to bark at me every time I walked through the door, every time I looked at her, every time I breathed in a way that she saw as threatening. Like Rachel, she was doomed to this life of anxious misery, and it was just so sad. But you know what would be even sadder? If Rachel was actually capable of happiness, but every single day, every time she hung out with the Undersiders, the conditions she needed to be happy just weren't met. In heartbreaking precision, this interlude shows us just how happy Rachel can be. We join her as she's riding Bentley, leading a pack of her augmented dogs, and for the first time ever, we see her laugh. Searching for the words bitch laughed produces exactly 2 results. This is one, and the other one is, according to Taylor, more of a snort with 0 humor to it. Rachel laughed produces 0 result. What this single instance of laughter tells us is that alone with her dogs is the only place where Rachel can be free. She encourages them, screaming stuff like, "Go, Bentley!" at the top of her lungs, not as a form of mind control, but because she knows it makes them happy. She feels safe and understood and loved. Her connection to her dogs is further emphasized by the fact that within her own narration, Rachel is referred to as bitch, which means that's how she thinks about herself. Out of respect for that, that's how we're going to refer to her from now on. We see how attuned Bitch's thinking is to getting along with dogs, and soon after, we are shown how badly attuned she is to thinking about humans. As she's riding Bentley, synchronizing her breaths with his footfalls, she feels a joy that she knows none of the Undersiders do. And yet when thinking of the Undersiders, Bitch wonders, why are they happier than me? This should fire up an error message in your brain. Are they happier than her? Similarly to Danny's interlude, the real treat here is seeing someone rationally arrive at wrong conclusions. She was unhappy because humans were pack animals, Bitch decided. Taylor and Lisa and Brian could smile and laugh because they had their pack, they had their family members, and they had each other. Alec was more of a loner, but he could still joke and laugh with Brian. They had their pack, their dynamic. Bitch doesn't know that they're faking it. She can't see how much unresolved trauma they're carrying with them or how lonely they all are. She thinks they're happy because she sees them smiling. It was one thing to hear Lisa tell us that Rachel can't read humans as a side effect of her power, and it's quite another thing to see the depths of that inability ourselves. But it's unclear how much of Bitch's antisocial tendencies stem from her power and how much from her upbringing, or lack thereof. A therapist once told me that it's much worse for a child to be left alone than to be abused. That is, a lack of contact with human beings, the lack of opportunity to learn how to communicate, leaves a human being worse off than being around human beings who actively hurt them. But little Rachel gets both. She reminisces about being raised by a mother who ignored and rejected her in what little time she was home. Bitch remembers what it was like to sneak through a party full of strangers, trying not to get crushed underfoot as she snatches a half-empty bag of chips to eat under her bed. That's how she survives until one day her mom doesn't come back. The reason I couldn't make this essay shorter is because every single detail here is so precious and meaningful. The way Bitch describes the cans of pears and nuts in foul-tasting syrup as disappearing instead of being eaten by her, communicating the mental state that she's in. The heartbreaking fact that Rachel is too scared to leave the apartment in search for her mother in case it's exactly at that moment that her mother comes back. That she's so terrified of being abandoned by this person who has already abandoned her. Also, we see little Rachel being proactive in improving her situation by attempting to cook some rice she finds in a situation where other children will just give up and cry. She's so small she needs to stand on a chair in order to reach the stove. Trying is important. Rachel accidentally spills the hot rice water over herself, and her screaming causes the neighbors to call 911. Then Rachel is taken by social services into foster home after foster home, each one worse than the last. This stuff really hurts to read over how real it feels. I don't even want to get into it, only to the feeling that Rachel is punished severely for not complying with demands with which she is unable to comply. There is something obviously unreasonable about sending a child to bed without dinner over using the wrong kind of fork. Never the carrot, always sticks, Bitch recalls. Notice how Bitch never uses metaphorical sticks on her dogs? Little Rachel finds solace in a puppy she finds and raises in her foster home's backyard, feeding him at the heroic cost of starving herself, until one night as she plays with him, he runs off and falls into the pool. The foster mother sees it, realizes what has been going on, and decides to punish Rachel. She flips a switch and the automatic plastic cover slides over the dog's head, drowning him. After our master, after Sophia, we have to wonder, is this foster parent even trying to do good, or is she just using the power she was given by the system in order to indulge in sadistic glee? Rachel triggers, uses her powers, and the pup, guided either by sheer spite or willingness to do Bitch's unconscious bidding, kills the foster mother right away. And that's it. That sums up all of the guidance and upbringing that Bitch has ever gotten. I don't think her ability to understand human beings changed significantly after her trigger event. But either way, as she arrives at teenage life, she has no idea how to communicate with people. A lesser author would have made her resigned and passive, but as Bitch's theory of mind is explored, we see the opposite. Even though she fails to understand the undersiders in a way that's almost funny, she tries to understand them. I think there's an important message here. In political discussions about how society should treat its weakest, there is a lot of talk about people just needing to try harder, especially in the US. The allegation that some people don't try to improve their situation is often used as an excuse to abandon them. But Rachel tries her best. Her life is a thing of true horror. As far as she's been taught, people around her will pretend to want to help, only to hurt her, only to punish her for things she couldn't help but do. And everyone is like this to her. She has no way of telling. Imagine living in a world where everyone wears a mask and holds a knife behind their back. Wouldn't you attack first if one of them got too close? Unlike Coyle or Taylor that want to control other people, all that Bitch wants is to play with her dogs and not be hurt. And yet she tragically keeps putting herself in situations where she's hurt badly. One of the many examples is her meeting Taylor for the first time. Trying to defend herself from this menacing stranger put her in a situation where she got punched by Brian. Another is that knowing that the Undersiders would be mad at her for interfering with Hookwolf's dog fighting ring, something she was morally obligated to do, she tried to hide it. But hiding it is what got Brian to choke her against the wall in the middle of the street. And yet Taylor managed to earn her trust. She communicated her willingness to help, not with words, but through shared suffering. Bitch trusted her and Taylor betrayed her, and that betrayal hurt so much that she tried to kill Taylor back in the ward's headquarters. Why did it hurt so much? Not just because Bitch is a dog person, but because Taylor becoming her friend may have been the only chance that Bitch will ever have to have a human friend. But because Bitch is a good human being, there's a part of her that feels guilt for trying to get rid of a teammate, and that guilt haunts her. Everything that has to do with humans pains her now, and she's trying to turn everyone away, even her own minions given to her by Coyle, even the people in her territory. And when she tries to drive the people of her territory away, she does it like a wild dog would. She howls. The people in her territory can't understand what the howling means, so Bitch has to go on house visits. Bitch is already on edge, ripe with guilt and Sophia-esque misery turned rage, and so when one of the people in her territory shoots at Angelica, Bitch's favorite being in the universe, this sets Bitch off. She tells her dogs to fetch the man, hold him in their teeth, and stretch him a little. There's this moment when the man is trying to understand what's going on, trying to communicate his perspective to Bitch, trying to explain that as he saw a half-a-ton monstrous predator outside of the house in which he was trying to keep his children safe, he thought it was a pretty decent idea to shoot at it. Bitch simply has no idea whether he's lying, defying her, or openly mocking her, so she plays it safe and tells the 1,000-pound Angelica to step on the man. The horror here is profound and twofold. From Bitch's side, we see the depth of loneliness and uncertainty that her specific kind of insanity causes. From the man's side, the horror of being crushed by a gigantic dog is augmented by the fact that he's trying to communicate to the person giving the command to hurt him, and she simply can't understand him because of something way deeper than language. He may as well have been dancing and farting. The heart of the horror is that what was done to Rachel, either by the sustained neglect and abuse, by her power, or by both, has turned her into someone incapable of human friendship. Psst, what about Taylor? Glory Girl and Brandish arrive to stop Rachel from feeding people to her dogs. Why is Glory Girl here out of all of the possible heroes Wildbow could summon to contrast Bitch? Yes? 2 reasons. One is that later on in Amy's interlude, when Vicky leaves the house to fight Bitch, the reader will be shown and not told how all of these interludes are happening at the same time, making it all feel more alive and interconnected. 2 is because Vicky is the one that severely wounded Bitch in Cole's alternate reality bank heist, giving us a sense of the danger. Very nice, but there is one more. We'll get to it soon. As for your second point, the fact that Vicky brutalized Bitch in the alternate reality bank heist makes it so satisfying to see that Bitch is now strong enough to put the 2 heroines on the back foot. Like Tinkers and Taylor, Bitch benefits from having time to prepare, and now that she has more dogs and a crew to take care of them, she's that much more powerful. And still, she doesn't even want to fight. Once again, she's just playing it safe. Besides, what was she going to do? Talk to them? This is the third difference between Bitch and Vicky. Bitch prefers not to hurt people, while Vicky brutalizes people for fun and has her sister cover it up. And that's even though Vicky grew up with everything, while little Rachel had nothing. As if this contrast isn't clear enough, when Bitch's dog stormed Vicky, she yells one distressed word. Mom! Wait, no. It should be more like, Mom! The difference between them isn't just that one of them has a mother and the other doesn't, though, of course, that's an interesting foil, especially when we cross-compare with Taylor. But that in Vicky's world, there is someone to call to for help, and in Bitch's, there isn't. As they fight the dogs, the heroines realize how overwhelmed they are and decide to grab the wounded man and run away, only to realize that there's a woman standing over him. She's as naked and shameless as Eve was in the garden, and her skin is striped in black and white, but not in the way that a real Siberian tiger would be, but strictly monochrome, as if she's not of this world. The heroines stop. It's the Siberian, Brandish tells her daughter, horror in her voice. Run. And then they both turn tail and bounce, leaving the men to die. I love how clearly that communicates how scared we should be, even before the Siberian shoves 2 fingers in the wounded man's eyes, going knuckles deep. I want to zoom out here for a second. First time reading Worm, I had a feeling that one of the main themes was everybody's doing their best. This was something that was communicated on many levels up until precisely this point in the story. The high school staff are overworked and under-rested, and they simply don't have the resources to take care of Taylor when there are gang members sneaking weapons into the school. The nurse at the hospital wants to talk to Taylor, but she can't because sometimes, if you talk to people, they sue. The Undersiders aren't villains, they're just a bunch of teenagers trying to survive, or, in Bitch's and Brian's case, take care of their families. Faultline's crew just want to take care of one another, and so on. Leviathan is a force of nature, and as it approaches, everyone comes together to stop it, including Kaiser. Sure, Amy, Vicky, Emma, and Sophia are assholes, but they're teenagers. Our Master and Bakuda are adult assholes, but they were having a breakdown. Annette didn't want to leave Taylor alone. She just had a moment of weakness and looked at her phone while driving. The reason that suffering exists in this world isn't because someone wills it, I thought, but because people fail to prevent it. The Siberian changes that. We don't know who she is, we don't know what her power is, but we know this: she's not there to help anybody. She isn't having a mental breakdown as far as we know. I can't even say that she's spiteful. She seems like she's leisurely enjoying herself. Bitch describes her as relaxed, as if she just woke up in a safe place. Goals. Bitch tries to talk to her, and when the Siberian doesn't answer, she sets her dogs on her. The fact that the dogs, weighing almost half a ton each, can't even make her budge communicates how many orders of magnitude stronger she is, even though we don't know what her power is yet. The power of each one of the 9 is going to be a continuation of a power that we've already seen, augmented to a monstrous degree. This makes it easier to believe and feel less out of place. For the reader, it's easy to see the Siberian as a development of Weld. You can't stab Weld or knock him out with a punch, but you can push him if you apply enough muscle. With the Siberian, you can't even do that. Spoilers below. She's invulnerable and, in physics terms, of near infinite power. That alone puts her in the category of horror. Okay, but the Siberian doesn't exist in a vacuum. Worm is about lenses, about perspectives. Why is the Siberian here with Bitch? How is she a foil to Bitch? Because even though Bitch defaults to using words which she hates, the Siberian refuses to indulge in them. In response to Bitch's shouting, the Siberian looks down, making herself seem small and unthreatening. When she gets up and approaches Bitch, her body language is playful, similar to the way a fully grown dog would play with a pup. When she sniffs Bitch nose to nose, she says something in the only language that matters to Bitch, the only language she intuitively understands. And what she says is this: I want to be your friend. And Rachel knows that this woman isn't lying. Why would she? That kind of power can't be faked. If she wanted to kill Bitch, she could. If she wanted to torture and eat her, she could do that right then and there. If she's being playful, it's simply because she really does want Bitch's company. And Bitch is amazed by this. The thing that is offered to her is incredible. Bitch herself concluded earlier in this interlude that the reason that she's unhappy is that she needs human connection, but she's unable to obtain or maintain it because of language and trust. The Siberian bypasses these two problems easily, and Bitch instantly falls in love with her, platonically. She's enamored by the possibilities this woman offers. And then the Siberian turns and runs away. Not quickly, not as an escape. She runs a little, then stops, looks back at Bitch, and runs a little more. It's an invitation to follow wherever she's going. Bitch wouldn't know how to explain this to another human being, not even to herself. But the way this woman runs on all fours is not the way a dog runs when they're free, but the way a dog runs when their master whistles. The Siberian is not the leader of her pack, but there is a pack, one that she wants Bitch to join. A pack in which maybe Bitch won't have to rely on facial expressions and words. A pack where she won't be bogged down by human law and, like the Siberian, would be able to kill whoever she wanted. But Rachel doesn't want that, not really. There is a part of her that, despite everything, still wants to be good. We've seen that with the people in her territory, with Glory Girl and Brandish, an insistence to hurt as little as she safely can. She still wants to have a connection with her teammates who are non-murderous humans. Mostly. She's given this huge incentive to give up on all of that, and yet she doesn't. Seeing her hesitation, the Siberian runs off and disappears, leaving the invitation open. I owe you an apology. You may have noticed that I changed something in my retelling of this scene. In the original, the Siberian talks to Bitch, literally talks with her mouth in plain English. This causes a lot of friction and resistance on Bitch's side, and also, it doesn't make any goddamn sense. As a cope, I try to interpret the talking as the Siberian uses body language, but Bitch interprets that as speech. But I couldn't make it stick because the Siberian keeps saying stuff like, "As of this moment, you're the only one to hear me speak and live afterwards." Which can't be translated into body language. Also, why would the Siberian do this? And I mean that why rhetorically. There's no reason. Of all of the people that the Siberian can choose to talk to, Bitch is the worst choice. I am extremely out of line, but I think that if we ever get an edit for this book, the Siberian should shut the fuck up. My patron, Duck, however, claims that the Siberian's clumsy handling of the situation intentionally shows that she's not the real deal, which is why Bitch rejects her. Apply judgment. Anyway, when Bitch returns home, she finds out that her crew has been brutalized, though not the dogs, and that the Siberian has left her a symbolic gift, a wolf pup. What does the wolf symbolize? A wolf is an undomesticated dog, a dog that has not been broken to fit humans. Bitch must choose what she is to become, subservient to humans or feral, wild, and noble. Bitch reaches for the pup, which bites at her fingers. "Little bastard," she says, thus giving him his name, Bastard. Because she's still a Wildbow character, the illiterate bitch gives an appropriate name. A bastard is a child born out of wedlock, alluding to the fact that bitch received him through her hidden love affair with a Siberian. And, like Judas and Brutus, the naming again alludes to betrayal, something of which bitch herself is now complicit. Bitch applies her power on Bastard just to see how it feels and finds that her power works better on the pup, which, to me, doesn't make any goddamn sense. Bitch's power manifested specifically to save a dog, not a wolf, and even if it didn't, there's nothing more natural about a wolf than a dog. Every organism evolves in response to organisms in its habitat. In the case of wolves, the selection of which wolves are going to have more offspring was made by their prey, competitors, and parasites. In the case of dogs, the selection was done by humans competing over who could create the ugliest pug. But that doesn't change anything. Evolution does not give a shit how you come to produce more fertile offspring, as long as you do. But this is just a pet peeve of mine, no pun intended. It's not what this chapter is about. What is this chapter about, then? About how hard it is to fit into the society of human beings for the unequipped. From Rachel's perspective, we see how she fails to accommodate the impossibly intricate verbal handshakes and social shibboleths that human society demands through no fault of her own, and we see how society vilifies her. We see how, when a person's ability to communicate is damaged severely enough, no amount of trying will get them out of that hole. They need to have someone throw them a rope. Considering that it's other people's misdoing that pushed little Rachel into that hole and turned her into the dysfunctional bitch we know today, we have to reassess our framing when it comes to responsibility. How many people like Rachel have we met? How did we judge them? I am hopeful, or perhaps hopeful, that someone in a position of power over a real-life Rachel read this chapter and softened, even a little bit, in their approach to her. Worm is a philosophical work, and so as soon as it makes the statement, it makes the mirror statement. Some people are the opposite of bitch. They have excellent communication skills, and as we are learning from Worm that knowledge is power is an extreme understatement, people who are good at reading other people have it really easy. They don't have to try half as hard. In fact, sometimes they don't try at all and still their lives are peachy. One such person is Jack Slash. The first thing that Jack does is hold a baby in his hands, coo at her, talk to her a little, then shrug and say, "Nope, don't see the appeal." This is completely unmemorable if we don't have the theme of self-replication in mind, but after seeing Sophia, Coyle, Taylor, and Skidmark do everything they can to make others more like them, we are primed to notice as Jack does the same to the members of the Nine, and the members of the Nine do the same to their recruits. The first action that Jack performs is throwing a baby in the air, passing her to Theo as if he were passing a basketball, communicating that Jack sees babies as worthless because he is already satisfied as far as reproduction is concerned. Also, because we see this from Theo's perspective, we don't think of the baby as a baby, but as Esther, Theo's half-sister that he is caring for. Theo is the son of Kaiser, former leader of Empire 88, who died in Leviathan's attack. I knew a man like Kaiser once. Not a murderous Nazi, but a competent, if transparent manipulator whose only mode of communication was bending others to his will, even his own children. I went to high school with two of his sons, and looking back I can see that they both chose different strategies to cope with that constant oppressive pressure. The older one did his best to become just like his father, became outstandingly obnoxious, and to this day is the only person that I've ever struck out of sheer rage. The younger one is just a really nice dude. Perhaps too nice. Theo grew up under a similar pressure, as we can tell from the fact that his father had trained him to call him sir. But he decided that he doesn't want to be like his father, as we can already see through his rejection of the masculine ideal communicated by his dedication to taking care of a baby girl. Wildbow once again maximizes contrast even in the way that these two characters refer to Esther. Extremely meaningless to Jack while being a core piece of Theo's chosen identity. Before we even know where we are, before we even know why Jack is there or how he got there, we're made to be undeniably aware of the power relations between the two. The throwing of the baby shows us just how helpless Theo is against Jack. The duck made the observation that a big part of Worm's uniqueness is its willingness to dive into that helplessness. This is hard to read and, I assume, much harder to write, not just because the author needs to stay in that unpleasant state of mind for much longer than the reader, but also because in order to realistically write characters in that situation, the author must sink deeply into that state and let himself feel it. I've seen many authors quit writing a story because they couldn't take the mental toll it demanded, but our boy just tailors his way through this shit. We follow Theo's perspective as he sits on the couch in his stepmother's house and listens to Jack explaining his plan. You see, Theo's stepmother is Caden/Purity, Kaiser's ex-wife and leader of the white supremacist villain group, The Pure, who Jack intends to kill. As if he were some comic book villain, Jack simply tells Theo how he's going to do it. The moment Caden steps through the door, Jack is going to kill her daughter, Esther, and as she's weakened by that mental shock, he's going to kill Caden too. Why is Jack, written in 2011, making a mistake that Watchmen's Ozymandias mocked as early as 1987? Well, because he can get away with it. We believe he can get away with it for two reasons. One is that we were already introduced to him during the previous arc. While Alec was making Sophia tie an electric cord into a noose, Dina was letting Coyle and the Undersiders know that Jack is the one who makes everyone die. That at some point the population of the world starts dropping rapidly, and the probabilities of that happening are directly tied to Jack. It doesn't just make him interesting to us, it means that he's got too much weight to just die in his introduction scene. Second is that he's got a half-dead Oni Lee lying in the bathtub. Wildbow develops show don't tell into the superior form of show and tell. We've been told that Jack has been going around murdering people for decades without being caught, but being told is not the same as seeing this proof of Jack defeating an assassin that Taylor barely managed to survive. Taylor could only retaliate against Oni Lee because she used her bugs to get his instant location. If Jack beat him, he must have had, aside from his power of broadcasting his knife slashes, some intuition that allowed him to guess the assassin's next move. Which leads us to the third reason we think Jack can actually put it off. Jack is a good reader of people. In his Keystone speech, Jack explains to Theo that every person has a central thing in their life keeping them from falling apart. Jack prides himself in finding people's keystones and pulling them out. By the end of Arc 12, we'll get an interlude by Jack himself. After reading it for the first time, I had arrived at a theory. In the same way that the Siberian's power is a continuation of Wells, so is Jack's ability to read people a continuation of Bitch's. In the same way that Bitch is good at reading dogs, so is Jack good at reading people. But unlike Bitch, who uses that power to make her dogs stronger and healthier, Jack uses his talent to find the worst way to break people down. We're going to talk more about Nazi motivation when we get to Hookwolf, but for now, suffice it to say that Caden really believes the 14 words. All she cares about is the future of her child. Take that away, and she literally doesn't have anything to fight for. Whether she falls to pieces or lashes out in blind rage, against an enemy like Jack, she's going to lose. Theo knows this. Also, Jack tells Theo that he's going to kill him as soon as Caden arrives to strengthen the effect, which is quite a thing to say to another human being. Let's zoom in. Just for one breath, imagine with me what it's like to sit in the living room with Jack Slash, knowing that he's going to kill you in 20 minutes or so, and knowing there's nothing you can do about it. Hopeless, isn't it? So as they wait for Caden to arrive, the murderer and his future victim have a surprisingly intimate conversation. Again, the contrast. For Theo, this is the last conversation he's ever going to have. For Jack, it's a Tuesday. But Jack isn't indifferent. There's a curiosity in him, a real interest in what Theo has to say. When Theo begins to sink into shock, Jack tries to get him to keep talking by offering incentives like a quick death or a chance to go to the bathroom before he dies so he won't poop himself. Theo talks more and more, and as he does, he opens up. This is his last chance to be honest with another person and with himself. And so Theo tells Jack that he loves his stepmother, though she doesn't love him back. He tells Jack that he always wanted to be a hero, unlike his father, and that if he were ever to trigger himself, he would kill people like Jack without a trial. Lisa will later say something similar on purpose, but Theo, sweet tender Theo, is no manipulator. He doesn't have the insight to read that amusement is Jack's main driving force. He's just being sincere and stumbles upon saying something that saves his life. When he tells Jack to his face that he would kill him if he could, this piques Jack's appetite for entertainment, and it's that appetite that makes Jack change his mind about killing Caden. Instead, he cuts a deal with Theo. Well, more like hands him down the rules of some game. Jack gives kind, gentle Theo 2 years to become a killer like his father and kill Jack. If he doesn't, Jack is going to kill Theo and another 1,000 people that he wouldn't have otherwise. Theo accepts the deal, less in the sense that he agrees to it and more in the sense that he accepts the fact that his life has been taken from him and replaced with something else. A game. He can't escape from it. If he kills himself, Jack will kill those 1,000 people. Theo himself has been transformed from a human being into a toy. This isn't the same transformation as the one I described in the opening. Theo isn't made to give up. Quite the contrary. From that day on, we can assume that he's going to try harder than ever. Then why is this here? One answer could be that Theo's transformation isn't the focus here, but Caden's. Caden's aborted transformation fits the pattern of being made to give up perfectly. Well, not perfectly. Jack arriving out of nowhere and taking Esther isn't the most despair-inducing thing possible. You know what would be more despairing? Preparing for 2 years to kill Jack only to fail and watch 1,000 people die because of that failure, which is exactly what Jack plans for Theo. Jack has been avoiding getting murdered by the world's strongest heroes for decades now. Even if Theo does nothing but train for the next 2 years, Jack is going to slaughter him and enjoy every second of it. While the Siberian went for the low-hanging fruit that is bitch, Jack is a farmer. He sows now so he could reap later. Theodore, from Greek meaning gift of God, does that mean that Jack, being as powerful as a god over Theodore, gifts him his life, or that Theodore is God's gift to the world for his future role in the fight against the Nine? Goes through one of the most interesting transformations here, because he's only going through the first half. He is given hope, a new keystone. But as the interlude ends and Jack leaves, we don't see that hope taken away. When comparing the Nine to Emma and Sophia, there is one sense in which the Nine are not more advanced in their cruelty. In fact, aside from Jack, most of them could learn from the girls. As Taylor tells it, right before the locker incident, Emma and Sophia had let up on the bullying. Things had been quiet for a while. One popular girl had actually started talking to Taylor, and Taylor had begun to hope, only to then be put through the mind-shattering experience that turned her into the girl we know and love today. We don't know whether that girl was told by Emma and Sophia to befriend Taylor, but if she was, there is a sense in which they are crueler than the Siberian, even if they never poked anybody's eyes out. Almost every character in Worm is a foil to Taylor, or at the very least has one key similarity to her. With Theo, it's that he is made to hope, just like Taylor was. Knowing how it ended for Taylor, we are scared for Theo. This is what makes Jack scary, not his ability, but his willingness to toy with somebody's life that way. That's what makes him the ninest of the nine. He is the only one that seeds hope long-term. Mannequin does it a little, but the cycle of sowing and reaping takes less than a minute, as we'll see in the next video. The other members are too wild and unfocused to make those kinds of moves, and there's a reason we don't remember them as well, though I claim that if we focus on them, if we give them our full attention, they are just as terrifying as Jack. Let me prove my point, starting with Burnscar. So my therapist asked me what Burnscar's trauma was, and I realized that I didn't know. Please don't word of God me, I don't care. I'm here to solve puzzles, not be told the solutions. So what do we know about Burnscar? First of all, she has burn scars on her face. 2 rows of symmetrical cigarette burns. I had burn scars too. At 18, I was really into breathing fire, and I was good at it every single time, except for that one time where I wasn't. As I was trying to impress one of my sister's hot friends, I lost my focus for a second, botching the spinning part of the trick and lit half of my face on fire. I remember trying to put my face out only to realize that my hands were also on fire, and after a period that must have lasted less than 10 seconds, I finally recalled that I had prepared a glass of water in advance exactly for that scenario and splashed it on my face. I healed surprisingly well, though for years, every time I exerted myself in cardio, you could see a lighter stain on my face where the blood vessels hadn't fully healed. But while my scars were blotchy, superficial, and accidental, Burnscar's are symmetrical, deep, and intentional. You can imagine the girl that she had been, sitting motionless, sweating and shivering as someone slowly brings a lit cigarette towards the sensitive skin of her face, aiming carefully as they make art out of her suffering. We're led to think that it was someone of authority, someone who Burnscar was completely helpless against. Someone who was God over her universe like Jack was to Theo, Bitch's neglectful mother to little Rachel, or the Siberian to every child of God unfortunate enough to cross her path. In her first appearance, Burnscar is described as pale, with dark circles under her eyes, with a mess of tangled dark hair, walking barefoot. Why am I getting the feeling she never got over this abuse? Just like with the Siberian, the superficial physical horror hides a deeper, truer one. The interlude starts from Spitfire's perspective in the middle of a fight between Faultline's crew and the scar-burned lady herself. Spitfire thinks about how it sucks to have fire powers because you can't burn the people who are flame retardant by definition. And the people who aren't resistant to flames, well, you can't burn them either, just for other reasons. The Nine take the story out of its cops and robbers phase into a kill or be killed phase. Sadly for Faultline and her crew, Burnscar is much better at it than they are. Even though she is as vulnerable as a baseline human to anything but fire, it's damn hard to fight someone who can teleport from flame to flame while everything around you is on fire, including your teammates. We change perspective to Labyrinth/L. In fact, this entire interlude was from L's perspective from the start, watching the fight from the window of her room at the Palanquin nightclub. But Wildbow pulled a quick one on us. By starting the interlude with a couple of paragraphs talking about things that Spitfire always used to say, we were led to believe we were seeing things from her perspective. This is cool as heck, and I'm going to develop that in my next book. From Elle's perspective, we see how hard it is to be Labyrinth in two ways. First of all, her power. From Taylor's perspective, we saw her changing the Merchant's Mall into a fantasy-esque dungeon with braziers, and Taylor speculated that Labyrinth could just as easily make it so that the floor was literally lava. But now, as Elle tries to create some water-pouring device to save her friends, we see from her perspective that she doesn't so much create as chooses from visions of possible places that she can draw from. This, like Cole's power and the description of the entities, hints at the many worlds nature of this universe. Elle doesn't create so much as phase in parts of other realities. In this case, the only water-pouring device she finds is a part of some meth puzzle where Little Ball needs to get to a specific point in order to get the water to flow, which I assume is extremely frustrating for Elle as her only friends are getting roasted, and I'm not talking about receiving harsh personal insults. The second thing that makes it hard to be Elle is her mind. As she watches the fight go on, she wants to coordinate with the others, but she can't find her phone. She's lucid now, but before she was in a fugue state and left her phone in the kitchen. Now, if she goes and gets it, she will break her power's hold. In order for her power to work, she needs to give it time to soak into a physical space. Which tells us that when Faultline's crew crashed the Merchant's party, that was after being there for a while and choosing not to intervene even as people were killing each other in the free-for-all. Elle breaks the window with a chair in order to yell something to Shamrock, but she doesn't know what. Everything she tells Shamrock, Burnscar will also hear. I love this. I love that in Worm you can't have a scene where someone is making toast without it somehow being a war over information. Eventually, Burnscar knocks out the entirety of Faultline's crew, opens the door to the Palanquin Club, and walks in. Elle realizes that Burnscar is there for her, but she can do nothing but just sit there and wait. The 9 arc, if it wasn't clear, is about horror. A minute later, the door to Elle's room opens. Burnscar is on the other side, and Elle greets her. She isn't good at talking, even on good days, so she only says one word. Burnscar's name, Mimi. Did I say that names are important? Because I'm starting to think that maybe names are important. Mimi can be Miriam or Michelle or Amelia, so we can't use our normal mode of analysis here, but we don't need to. The importance isn't the meaning of the name, but the fact that Elle knows it at all. This is such a cool way to let us know that Elle and Burnscar know each other. The first thing that Burnscar does is tell Elle that her friends are alive, that she doesn't think she did any permanent damage. Thank you. Elle manages. She can't entirely suppress the bitterness in her voice. Burnscar doesn't seem to notice. Again, this power dynamic, but now Burnscar is God, and El is the one helpless. Like Jack in the Siberian, Burnscar could kill El in a second. But here's the difference that makes this interaction a progression from what we've seen before. Burnscar says that she didn't mean to hurt anybody, that she can't help it. You see, a side effect of Burnscar's power is that while she's manipulating flames, she can't feel guilt or remorse or shame. That part only comes after. The problem is that the more she uses her power, the more guilt she accumulates, and so the more she's drawn towards using her powers to relieve that guilt. How different is that from what's going on with Sophia? With Burnscar, it's her power, which is, as we begin to suspect, an external intervention done onto her brain. But how different is that from Sophia's naturally evolved brain? The idea of cortices in the brain being separate things is low resolution, but for our purposes, it is useful to say that the more active a specific cortex is, the more it inhibits the others. Let's talk about two specific structures. The default mode network, which is responsible for introspection, self-image, and recollection of past events, and the amygdala, which is responsible for fear and aggression. When Sophia throws herself into an unnecessary fight with some looters, her amygdala activates hard and inhibits the fuck out of her default mode network. All of this neuroanatomy is here to say something that you already know. Sophia is throwing herself into fights because when she's ducking under a knife swing, she doesn't feel like an antisocial failure. But it's those same violent bouts that make her into an antisocial failure. Every person that I've ever talked to about overeating told me that it's exactly because they hate themselves so intensely that it's so hard to resist falling back on the tranquilizing effect of binge eating. This is what makes losing weight so hard. You suffer that pain all of the time. You have to choose to take on that pain every day, and if you're working from home or not working, every moment of wakefulness is a moment where you have to resist opening your fridge and feel not horrible for 10 minutes. And every time you slip, you make it harder to improve your situation. It's the exact same thing with alcohol or masturbation or video games. Think of the addicts that you know. Are they stuck in a similar cycle? Burnscar is so deep in this thought pattern that she seems to confuse doing bad things and feeling bad about them. When Elle heroically says, "Can't keep hurting people, Mimi," Mimi responds with, "I have to. I can just use my power, stay in that headspace where I don't feel bad, where I act the way the nine expect me to." Elle isn't the focus of the horror here. Mimi is, and Elle is acting as a foil. Elle was changed by her powers, an instant involuntary event. What Burnscar went through is significantly more horrifying. Like Ern, she was put into an unbearable situation by outside forces, but what ruined her was her own decision to alleviate her emotional suffering in a way that is self-destructive. This is what I meant when I said in video 0 that the term self-destructive is misleading. Mimi doesn't want to be destroyed, she's just not strong enough to resist the comfort that this path offers. It's the comfort that draws her in, not the self-destruction. This is why she reaches out to Elle. She hopes to get some comfort from a healthier, more wholesome source: friendship. But as she looks at the walls around her, she sees that Elle's power is slowly transforming the room into what Elle calls the bad place. Pitted walls lined with barbed wire and jagged rows of glass, stains of shit and blood on some of the cloth. Seeing Mimi makes Elle recall the place where they first met, a psychiatric hospital, if you can even call it that. Just like with which, we're exposed to a shocking magnitude of neglect that, once again, feels depressingly plausible. The feeling of complete helplessness in front of another human being is something that Elle knows very well. Yes? I find it interesting that aside from her relatively short time in the locker, Taylor, the protagonist, never suffered anything like this. Taylor could skip school whenever she wanted or punch her bullies in the face if she felt like it. She chose not to do both, until she did. Having her spine broken was painful and horrifying, but Taylor chose to fight Leviathan. Elle didn't choose shit. I agree. Elle is one of the most interesting foils to Taylor, as we'll keep seeing. Back to the scene, there's something heartbreakingly innocent about the fact that Mimi is asking to be friends with Elle. Even more so as when she looks at the walls, at the image Elle's mind summons in response to her, she starts to suspect what Elle's answer would be, but she isn't sure. Mimi, like bitch, can't tell. Not because she can't read people, but because her own temper makes it so that Elle has to lie to her in order to survive. Always did. Mimi's insanity is far more limited than Bitch's. She can read human expressions just fine, but she doesn't really remember what she turns into when she uses her power. She doesn't understand how terrified people are of her. She knows something is wrong, she knows nobody likes her, but she still grasps for that last chance at friendship. Mimi's voice is choked as she pleads. I thought we were friends. We had our moments, didn't we? Only a few times when we were both allowed out of our cells, when we were having good days, a few jokes, stories. I mean, I know that some of the time I was coming off a bad spell, so maybe I snapped or called you names or threatened you. Threatened her? We know that whatever Burnscar did was way worse than that. Maybe she does too, because her temper changes all at once. Did you see me as a friend? Don't you dare lie to me. Elle can't come up with a reply. They used me as an enticement to get you to cooperate. The system has failed these girls, and it has failed them hard. Elle doesn't remember Mimi as a friend. She remembers her as an abuser at worst and a tool for abuse at best. Do you remember the next thing that Mimi says, her response to Elle's silence? To me, this is one of the parts in Worm that make me feel proud of this author. It's like Walbo woke up that day and said, am I going to do something good enough today, or am I going to create something truly refreshing and beautiful? Because it would have been so easy to have Mimi react with rage to the understanding that Elle never saw her as a friend. It would have been so easy for both character and author to cow Elle into agreeing into whatever self-image Mimi wants to convince herself of, the same way Sophia cowed Emma on the phone. But instead, Burnscar says this. Oh, fuck. Fuck me. I'm sorry. And then she turns away to leave. She accepts that Elle doesn't want to be her friend. She doesn't force her. She doesn't demand answers. Even though she has all of the power in the world, she respects Elle's wishes, even though it breaks her heart. And Elle's response to this, to being given her freedom, she hurries to cross the room and wrap her arms around Burnscar, hugging her from behind. We had some good times, Elle lies. Take care. Elle's heroism here is perfect. She hugs Mimi even though she doesn't love her. There's no future loyalty to be gained here. Mimi won't and can't tell the Nine to go easier on Elle and her friends, and when her own power is activated, the part of her brain that might think of going easy on Elle will simply be turned off. Elle hugs her bully, her abuser, and possibly her future murderer, not because she absolves her of her sins, not because she forgives her, but because she knows that nobody hugged Burnscar in quite a while, and she probably really, really needs it. The thing that makes it even more beautiful is that Elle is furious with Mimi. At the start of the dialogue, when Mimi claims that she can't help it, Elle thinks, you can, you just don't try hard enough. I pointed out a lot of choices that I disagreed with today, and so you might think that I see this book as anything less than truly exceptional. Well, think again, because this unmemorable interlude is such a great example of why I love this book so much, and I want you to understand why. In literature and in life, we need a moral framework in order to judge people who hurt other people. With Burnscar specifically, it would be so easy to choose the common thesis. She hurts people, she chooses to do it, it's her fault, she should suffer. The antithesis would be that it isn't her fault, her power or evolution messed with her brain and she can't help it. But Walbo synthesizes these two negating views into one. Yes, circumstances have put Mimi in a situation where the easiest solution is to escape, hurting others and herself in the process. However, she can still choose to take the harder path. Elle suffered just as much as Mimi did, if not more, but she still didn't give up. But Mimi did, again and again, and in the way of karma, every time she gave up, Mimi became a little bit smaller and Burnscar got a little bit bigger. The gradual diminishing of the self is a pretty big theme in Worm. After the author held our hand with Burnscar, showing us how to think, he counts on us to do the same by ourselves as we try to understand Mannequin. But that, sadly, we'll have to wait for the next video. Let's summarize. Helplessness and despair are very different things. Helplessness is an externally determined condition. Despair is a choice. In this video, we zoomed in on 3 characters put into positions of extreme helplessness and saw how they deal with it. Bitch with stubbornness, Theo with sincerity, and Elle with kindness. None of them give in to despair, none of them beg, none of them bargain. What is common to these three characters? We can say that they've been helpless before, which is true, but that's an understatement. They've lived helplessness. For all of them, it was the default state. In our culture, it's so common to say, I have trauma, as a way to excuse some incompetence, some way in which we are exempt from trying. But Worm asks you to look at it differently, to see it as a source of power. In Emma's interlude, Sophia will later philosophize that there is a key difference between victims and survivors. When asked for the difference, she'll say that, on this violent, brutish little planet of ours, it's the survivors who wind up the strongest ones of all. But what will she mean by that? Once someone is put in a position of helplessness, they still have a choice whether to despair or to keep trying, whatever it is that trying means to them. It isn't the abuse that turns one into a victim, but their choice to give up and accept it. And this is a choice that we need to make every day. These are despairing times. It is easy to feel helpless in the face of a corrupt, failing system and the evil parasites that take refuge in it. There might be something we can do, and there might not be. I think there is. But even at times when we think there's nothing to be done, it's up to us to find a reason not to give up, be it duty or kindness, stubbornness or pride. Quoting Fist of the North Star, hey, as long as it works. I'm counting on you to find yours, though I assume you already have. In the next video, we'll see, in the way of foils, how the proud react to being made helpless, how those who have gotten used to having power cope completely differently than those who haven't. And so, we are done. I promised you in the last video that I'm going to tell you something about Taylor that can only be interpreted in the trusting interpretation, but I'm realizing that I'm only going to get to that point in the plot in 2 or 3 videos. However, according to practitioner rules, if I knowingly tell a lie, I will lose all of my magical powers, so here it is. As Taylor will be later warned about Shatterbird's upcoming attack on the city, she will instantly drop everything, including a wounded Lisa, to run herself to exhaustion in an attempt to warn her father in time. If you'd like, you can compare that purely benevolent action to Elle's hugging of Mimi, and notice that there are levels to their heroism, that even Taylor's most heroic action is still more self-serving than Elle's. You can also pretend that this was my plan all along. While we're at it, I should inform you that I might have made another mistake. When discussing Dina's first introduction to the Undersiders, I claim that the reason Dina's numbers change is that as soon as Taylor hears them, she understands what Dina's situation is and changes her mind about working for Coil. However, a more careful read shows that the chances of the travelers returning from a fight with Kaiser similarly diminish, weakening my theory that it's Taylor's change of mind that drives the probabilities and strengthening the theory that it's Leviathan's upcoming arrival that affects Dina's estimates. Thank you to Risigny from the official Worm server for pointing that out. Huge thanks to my beautiful patrons, particularly Stepped on Spider, Siren and Sang, Zilch and the Duck for their comments on this essay. It's really nice to have someone believe in your work, you know? Lately, the patrons and I have been reading Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit together, and I personally have been finding out so many new things about this book. If you're interested in that sort of thing, check out my Patreon page. Until next time, don't give up, you hear?